I can honestly say I have never felt the hatred I do for one person like I do this man.
Families grieving their loved ones addressed Darrell Brooks, the man who drove his SUV into a Christmas parade, killing 6 people, one a child, and injuring dozens more.
November 21st was a day that was supposed to be fun and filled with laughter and smiles. Instead, it became a nightmare full of fear, screams, and tears.
Darrell Brooks misbehaving in court again, insulting the DA who won his conviction.
I don't believe you're that bright.
And Judge Jennifer Doro throwing the book at Darrell Brooks.
He is fueled by anger and rage. Some people, unfortunately, choose a path of evil. And I think, Mr. Brooks, you are one of those such persons.
I'm Angenette Levy, and welcome to Law and Crime's Sidebar podcast, where we are recapping the sentencing hearing of Darrell Brooks, and it was an emotional hearing. Darrell Brooks, of course, is now convicted of killing 6 people and injuring dozens more at the Waukesha Christmas parade last November. It was just about a year ago, and it was a tragic, tragic event. And the reason that we had this trial was because of the 6 people who were killed, one of them being a child. Their names were Virginia Sorensen, Leanna Owen, Tamara Durand, Jane Kulik, William Hospital, and 8-year-old Jackson Sparks. Cathy Russon is the executive producer of the Law and Crime Network, and she is here with us to talk about what we watched over the last couple of days. Cathy, thanks for coming on. This was a really awful, sad thing to watch after watching this trial that became such a spectacle with Darrell Brooks basically just acting out every other day.
I mean, the circus. We could truly say this trial became a circus because of Darrell Brooks, and it all got brought back to where it needed to be with these victim impact statements. And I have to say, Angenette, I always think that I'm not really that affected. I've been doing this a long time. I've seen a lot of autopsy photos. I've heard a lot of horrible testimony. I could not stop the tears 2 days ago. I couldn't stop. I was sitting here in my office and I kept getting teared up because we lost the horrificness of what Darrell Brooks did because of how Darrell Brooks acted in the courtroom.
And I think you're right about that. And it's such a spectacle, such a circus that people tuned in thinking, what is this guy going to do next? And these people, these victims sat there and they testified and they were questioned by him. And it was like I kind of got the impression that he thought this was his last hurrah. And one of the things that really was strange throughout his trial was the fact that he would say, I don't recognize that name, or I don't go by that name, or he'd say his name was Darrell Brooks. I mean, people were actually calling him Darrell Brooks, but look at what happened at the beginning of the sentencing hearing when the parties were asked to introduce themselves.
Please.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Darrell Brooks, Jr. I'm here for this matter by special appearance. It is not my intention to bring any controversy to you, Your Honor, or your court today. I'm wondering how I may settle this matter.
So, Cathy, we now have the answer. His name is actually Darrell Brooks. I mean, what do you make of all of that? As a person who has watched trials for many years, we've seen defendants defend themselves. Never seen a defendant say, I don't go by that name. I don't acknowledge that name. Now we know he's Darrell Brooks.
Well, I've seen a little bit of that because if you have any familiarity with sovereign citizens, that is very standard for them. He claimed to be a sovereign citizen in a pretrial hearing when he fired his attorneys, and they have a certain jargon. They don't follow the laws of the states. It's very complicated, and also they don't always all follow the same rules as each other. But in part of that, he doesn't recognize the name Darrell Brooks, and so he kept saying he was a third-party representative for the person listed on the indictment. I mean, just crazy stuff, the whole trial. And every time he would object, I object to being called that name. I object to being called that name, over and over again. Then he's convicted, and we get the first day of sentencing, and she says, your appearances for the record. He said, Your Honor, I'm Darrell Brooks. We're like, wait, what? Today he's Darrell Brooks.
Yes, and he wanted to know how he could resolve the matter, and the only way he was going to resolve the matter was going to prison. And before he went to prison formally, we heard from the victims' families. One of them, 8-year-old Jackson Sparks. Let's listen to his mother, Sherry Sparks. She addresses the court and explains what happened and what she went through that day, learning that her son had been hit and later died.
Our family is forever changed. We are hurt, angry, traumatized, and broken. November 21st was a day that was supposed to be fun and filled with laughter and smiles. Instead, it became a nightmare full of fear, screams, and tears. My boys were walking in the Waukesha Christmas parade with their baseball teammates, friends, and coaches. It was a chilly and windy day that day, so we all layered up and prepared to kickstart our holiday season. We met up with our Blazers group, decorated the truck, prepared the buckets of candy and flyers for the boys, took some group photos, and then I left to go find my seat near the end of the parade route and wait for our group while enjoying the parade. I had no idea then the nightmare that was coming my way. Nor did I know that it would be the last time I would hear Jackson's voice and see his smile. I wish I would have known then that the hug he gave me before I went to sit down was the last hug I would ever get from him. I would have held on to him a lot longer.
Kelly Grabo also spoke. Her daughter, Delia, was seriously injured. She also testified at the trial.
There are so many times when I close my eyes, I still see my baby girl laying in the street helpless, not moving, just staring in complete shock, not even recognizing her own grandparents when they came to her side. Seeing that look in her eyes will forever be embedded in my mind. As a parent, we are supposed to be able to protect our children, and that day many of us were reminded of the ugly in this world, that no matter what we do, there will always be monsters like Darrell Brooks that are lurking around corners, just waiting for a chance to play those parts in our nightmares. Yet even after causing this much pain and destruction, he wasn't even happy with that. He didn't stop there. He took it upon himself to be his own representation, knowing full well he would be given the chance to question us as victims and rip open the wounds once again and show no remorse. I can tell you, sitting on the stand that day, reliving the horrific events, having him look in my direction brought up so many memories and emotions of that night. Hearing his voice made me cringe with disgust and anger. He changed our Delia that day. He stole her innocent, happy look on life and replaced it with fear and hate that no child at the now age of 10 should ever feel. Although those feelings are warranted, she was forced that day to see the ugly in this world also. And her joyous outlook on the holiday season was stolen. I'm not sure if she will ever again attend another parade, let alone a Christmas parade.
Cathy, we are both moms. Hearing these mothers talk about, one, her son was murdered, the other, her daughter is recovering, but just hearing the pain that this man has caused them, it really, I don't know, it's cathartic for them. They get to address the court, and that is their right. But the judge, I think, pretty much knew already what she was going to do with this case.
Oh, of course. This is the time. This is the time to finally let these parents say. They've tried not to say what they wanted to say. They didn't want to cause a mistrial. We saw that in the Parkland shooting case as well. These brave parents that had the most horrific thing happen to them. Angenette, I say it all the time. It's the one thing I don't think I could recover from, is losing a child as a mom. And also, I could not hold back. I don't think I could sit in the courtroom with Darrell Brooks. I think I would have been thrown out of that courtroom. So this is their time to finally say what they wanted to say. And honestly, they did it better than I could have ever done it. I probably would have been the one jumping over and trying to get to him.
Yeah, I often think, how do these people get through this? I don't understand how they get through it, because I can't imagine losing a child or a loved one to homicide, but these people, they get through it and they carry on. Leanna Owen was a grandmother who was killed, and her two sons spoke. Let's listen to Matt Owens. He spoke to the court and had some choice words for Darrell Brooks.
On November 21st, you killed my mother. And in this courtroom, I watched you run her down and her broken body slide across the concrete. This woman loved, and she was loved. you ran her down like she was nothing. And since that day, you have shown no remorse. You've offered no explanation for your atrocities. It offends me that you're sitting here breathing while she is not. You are a monster. You deserve contempt and death. Sadly, with no death penalty in this state, I can only hope they lock you away someplace so deep the rats chew on your fingers at night. As for me, this will never be over until the day I'm pissing on your grave. I think it would be fair to say that for your crimes, even God hates you.
Cathy, I wonder what you make of that whole thing at the end where he patted his chest and then Darrell Brooks did it back. I mean, it almost felt like he was mocking this man.
Well, this is why. So earlier in the day, Darrell Brooks kept doing this as people were talking, and he was rubbing his chest. It was all very weird and deliberate. So at first it's almost like, you see people pound their chest and then thank God, you see athletes do that a lot, that kind of, at first you think he's doing that, but then he's rubbing his chest, and then you think he's trying to soothe himself. Like, you couldn't make sense of why the chest thing. So these guys picked up on that. So when it was his turn to speak, he's like, every time. And so he did it mocking Darrell Brooks. He did this. And so after that, Darrell Brooks did it even more the rest of the day. The guy has no conscience at all. None.
No, and it was so sickening when I saw him do that. I was taken aback, but I've been taken aback so many times watching this case. It's hard for me to see how he could do anything more egregious or anything worse.
I'll say something else. I'm sorry. I'll say something else about those sons that spoke. I love both their comments. During the trial, part of the sovereign citizen thing is they want the state of Wisconsin. The state of Wisconsin is the person that charged him. He wanted the state of Wisconsin to get on the stand. And he kept saying, who is the plaintiff? Who is the plaintiff? There is no plaintiff. He used that word over and over again. One of those sons got up and said, I am the plaintiff. And then more followed after that. And that was some great moments for me in the courtroom. They're like, Darrell Brooks, look at me. I'm the plaintiff. I'm the victim in this.
What I find interesting about that too is when I was sitting in the courtroom listening to him say that the couple of days I was up there, I thought to myself, the state of Wisconsin it's made up of the people. So the state of Wisconsin is like, the DA is in there representing the people of the state of Wisconsin. So it just never made any sense to me, but I digress. One man got so upset about Darrell Brooks kind of arguing with the judge the other day that he had to be removed from the courtroom. Take a listen.
Integrity of these proceedings.
I'm not
and the
attempting to
solemnity
cause
of
a
what's going on
controversy. I
right
just
now.
wanted to know
By
that
once again trying to derail what's happening and
and
take
you
the
always
focus
talk
off of
about somebody trying to derail something as if that was the plan, like somebody coming
Mr.
here
Brooks,
to
I'm
derail
advising
something.
you to be quiet or I will clear this courtroom, and under Illinois versus Allen, you will lose your right to be present while the remainder of these individuals give their statements.
Okay, well, come on with it.
Once they start, I expect you to be
Come
quiet.
on with it, because that's what you've been waiting to do the whole time.
Listen up and listen what she has to say.
All right.
God.
Sir, you're going to have to be removed. I'm sorry. I can't tolerate that from anyone.
So Cathy, you and I know it doesn't matter. Even if Darrell Brooks is making a complete fool of himself, you can't have an outburst in the courtroom. The judge removed this gentleman, even though he was upset. She still can't have that going on in her courtroom.
Okay, well, look, I disagreed with this. And I'm not happy about this at all. And I'll tell you why. I do understand that. I do understand in courtrooms around the country, you're going to get immediately ejected if you shout out like that, right? But I won't say immediately, because sometimes that doesn't happen. But in this case, these family members have had to put up with his clowning in that courtroom forever. And they have watched her not throw him out and let him scream at her, talk back at her, basically threaten her, stare her down. And she waits forever to throw him out because she's trying to preserve the rights and she's trying to not get this case overturned. I get all that. There was no jury present. There was no jury present. And that dad was mad that Darrell, or I don't know if it was a dad, it was a family member, was mad that Darrell Brooks was speaking to the judge the way he was and that he was interrupting the DA. So he said, shut up and listen to her, right? I believe in that instance, Judge Darrell could have said, that's it, no more, one more outburst and I'll have you removed. I do not believe she needed to remove him. There was no jury there, and they had been through weeks of watching Darrell Brooks do whatever he wanted in that courtroom. So I was not happy with that. I loved Judge Darrell through most of this trial, and she has the patience of a saint, But I was not happy with that. I thought she should have let him stay in and just given him a warning.
Well, I think you're probably right about that, but maybe she was just trying to keep it from turning into a thing where other people fed off of it, and she didn't want other people jumping up. I don't know.
So I understand that. Let me just say one more thing about that.
Yes, go ahead.
Immediately she ejects him, okay? And then Darrell Brooks is still going off on a complete tirade. And it takes her a few minutes to eject Darrell Brooks. And they were back to back. Now, I will just say that after the break, after she removed Darrell Brooks, whatever, she did let the man come back in. So at least that happened.
Yeah. And I think we can all understand this man's anger and the cursing. I mean, come on. I was there for 2 days, and after about hour 3 of hearing him say grounds every time the prosecution objected, I was like, get me out of here. I mean, I felt for those families. I would look over and they were sobbing in the courtroom, and he's kind of making a mockery of the whole proceeding. Dawn Woods is Darrell Brooks's mother. And Darrell Brooks had actually said he had a long list of people who were going to speak on his behalf, but it ended up only being his mother, Dawn Woods, and his grandmother. And his mother, Dawn, talked about how Darrell Brooks has mental illness.
Mental illness cannot be eradicated with prison bars. Mental illness is going to always be there. It's invasive. With treatment and therapy, medication, and hospitals and institutions that specialize in the treatment of mental illness, it can be controlled. What else can we do as a society to help those who suffer from mental illness? How about showing a little compassion, empathy?
Cathy, I thought this was interesting because she's talking about the need for empathy and for lawmakers to act. But Darrell Brooks doesn't appear to have any empathy. So I think it's hard for these people to have empathy for someone, even if they have some mental health issues such as personality disorders. When this guy doesn't show any genuine remorse, how can anybody have empathy for him?
Look, I'm a mom. And so people, when they see these trials, watch these trials, a lot of people get angry that the moms or the dads will get up there and defend the monster, really, because Darrell Brooks really is a monster. But I'm a mom. I'm not going to defend my child's bad acts. I'm going to want them to pay. There's consequences for all actions. I believe that. But I can't, I'm just not going to go at her. I'm just not going to go at her about that. This is his mother. She does believe he's mentally ill. And as a mom, by the way, you're going to need to believe that this person that you raised, right, that you're responsible for, turned out to be such a monster. You're going to need to fully buy into the fact that mental illness is involved in this. So I sort of give her a pass on that. And I will say it was his mom, his grandma, and then a best friend also from Nevada. He actually had 3 people. He started out with more than 20, and we whittled down to 3.
Right. And I do feel badly for Dawn Woods. I saw her on the news up there, and I felt badly watching her speak like this to the court. She loves her son. She wants what's best for him. But I just think maybe that was not possibly the right place for that message. I don't know, because there are just so many people who've been impacted by this. Judge Doro ended up removing Darrell Brooks. Of course, he couldn't contain himself, and he started arguing with her yet again. So let's take a look.
Your Honor, as a public
Brooks.
servant, I have the right to ask questions
Sir?
of Your Honor.
I'm going to ask you one more time, and if you refuse to sit down, then you are in direct disobedience of a court order. Sit down and be quiet so I can make the appropriate record.
Can you tell me what the court
Right,
order
he's
is?
not going to obey. He's now forfeited
I
his
didn't say
right
I
to be
wasn't gonna
present.
obey.
He will go into the
I
other
didn't say I
courtroom.
wasn't going to obey.
We'll be in
I just asked
recess
what is the
until he's
order.
there.
Cathy, did you ever think that Darrell Brooks would make it through this sentencing hearing without being ejected from the courtroom?
Absolutely 100% no. Of course he was going to get ejected. But here's this guy who had just spent 2 full hours giving his own comments to the judge it was painful to listen to. I stopped reporting about it on Twitter and just started almost being comedic relief on Twitter because it was so ridiculous. But all of that theme of him was he's taking the high road. These victims had the right to say what they did, like a totally different person. reminding the day before when the victims were speaking, he was rolling his eyes, smirking, laughing. I thought his eyes would roll back in his head at some point. Now, when he's speaking, he's a man of, he testified of Jesus Christ. He testified about, and he said that he is repentant, all this stuff, right? And then fast forward a few minutes, and that's what he does because he cannot control himself. I kept said it all along. People are like, why do you think he did what he did? I said he got in a fight with his girlfriend and he has no impulse control. Darrell Brooks does what Darrell Brooks wants to do. He can't control his anger, and he just does what he wants to do. And that was perfect example. He can flip on a dime like that. As soon as he's not getting what he wants, he's very childlike.
Yeah, very much so. Well, let's take a look at some of those comments from the 2 hours. We're not going to watch 2 hours of comments from Darrell Brooks, but let's take a look at a little bit of what he said about the victims in this case.
I want each and every victim in this incident, family members, those who lost loved ones, those who are still healing. I want you to know that no matter how you felt during this year, no matter how you felt yesterday, I want everyone to know, also the community of Waukesha, I want you to know that not only am I sorry for what happened, I'm sorry that you could not see what's truly in my heart, that you cannot see the remorse that I have, that you cannot listen to all the phone calls that I've made to my family, that you cannot hear all the prayers that I've said in my cell, that you cannot count all the tears that I've dropped.
Cathy, what struck me about this was the fact that Darrell Brooks made this all about himself and the tears that he has cried and things like that. So obviously we knew the judge was going to throw the book at him. She was not going to show any leniency with the sentencing. Your thoughts on his comments right there, just talking about all of the tears that he has shed.
Well, look, we kept waiting for the apology, right? And even when his grandmother spoke, she spoke right to him and said, you need to take responsibility. You need to apologize today. So we kept waiting for it. So all of a sudden he said, I apologize basically for what happened that day, not for what I did. And then that was it. That 2 seconds was it. And the rest of the 2 hours was me, I, poor Darrell Brooks, poor me, poor I, this is what's happened to me. That's the whole thing for 2 hours. It was all about him. And I didn't see a tear, by the way. So he kept acting like he was crying. And, the joke was he kept staring at the ceiling. We're like, is he staring at the lights to try and bring tears to his eyes? This guy is just unbelievable. Just unbelievable.
He really is. And I think Judge Jennifer Doro, who you said has the patience of a saint, believes the same, that he's unbelievable. And she doesn't believe he's mentally ill. Listen to what she said before sentencing him.
In addition, before I get to that, I've also had, over my 11 years on the bench, of coming face to face with evil on occasion. There are many times, good people do bad things, but there are times when evil people do bad things. There is no medication or treatment for a heart that is bent on evil. Child trauma, bipolar, indifference, physical abuse of a child, or even childhood trauma did not cause Darrell Brooks to commit the acts for which he will be sentenced here today. It is very clear to this court that he understands the difference between right and wrong, and that he simply chooses to ignore his conscience. He is fueled by anger and rage. Some people, unfortunately, choose a path of evil, and I think, Mr. Brooks, you are one of those such persons. As a mom, my heart breaks for your family, for your mom, and for your grandmother. The son that she raised the grandson that your grandmother knew, the hopes and dreams they had for your life, they're gone. And I think it's perhaps far easier for them to blame a mental illness than to perhaps come to grips with their son did very, very bad things due to very bad motivations.
She's been really commended, Cathy, Judge Doro, for her restraint in this case. And it did seem like she allowed him to do a lot that was kind of crazy. I mean, she kind of had the penalty box, the extra courtroom, but she doesn't believe he's mentally ill. She said she thinks he's evil.
Well, look, she had 4 evaluations done on this guy. Early on, he pleaded not guilty by reason of mental defect, which, is not guilty by reason of insanity. And when that happens, the judge needs to order evaluations. He had 4 different evaluations. All of them came back saying he knows right from wrong, He had personality disorders at best. So she started out, I was sitting here in my office applauding her by saying, mental illness did not contribute to what happened that day. You, Darrell Brooks, chose the path of evil, and that is what happened that day. And he couldn't believe it. She's been treating him with kid gloves this entire trial, just trying to get through the trial, make sure there's nothing overturned, right? And I think in Darrell Brooks' head, he thinks she likes him, because during also parts of the trial, he almost acted like he was flirting with her. He'd go, Judge Darrell, this guy is so creepy. So I think he thought that. And then when she started saying what she really thought about him, his face, he was like cocking his ear like this, like, what is she saying right now? She said exactly what we have all known, and I'm glad that she said it. You did not do this because you were mentally ill. You did this because you chose a path of evil.
Darrell Brooks certainly thinks that he's a charmer, but we'll see if that charm works for him in prison, because that's where he is going now. 6 life sentences and plus 700 years. So he is never going to see the light of day again. Cathy Russon, executive producer of the Law&Crime Network, thank you so much for coming on and giving us your insight and your thoughts. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And that's it for this edition of Law&Crime Sidebar Podcast. It is produced by Sam Goldberg and Logan Harris. Bobby Zoki is our YouTube manager. Alyssa Fisher is our booking producer, and Kiara Bronson handles our social media. You can download and listen to Sidebar on Apple, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts. And of course, you can watch it on Law&Crime's YouTube channel anytime. I'm Angenette Levy, and we will see you next time.